Mark Biltz is an author of a book that he's well known for, Blood Moons Decoding the Imminent Heavenly is what the book is called. He's also a pastor. He has talked several times about the four blood moons, two in 2014 and two blood moons that will occur in 2015. He's also talked quite extensively on the rapture of the church happening on one of the days of the Feast of Trumpets. Now, I can hold to that theory, and here's an article, is what I specifically am talking about. Will the tribulation begin next year in 2015? Will the tribulation begin in 2015? And there's a lot to be said about that. And I haven't even read this article yet. I'm going to read it with you so we can come up with conclusions together from what this article is saying. So let's just begin. Where has the world headed since the first blood moon on Passover of 2014? Our world has now gone past the tipping point, and events are now accelerating out of anyone's control, just as ISIS has gone from the JV team to the A team, along with events spreading from Russia to Ukraine and planes being shot out of the sky. We see everything developing exponentially. He continues. Look at the Ebola, for example. From the Centers of Disease Control, we see that the 2014 Ebola outbreak is one of the largest Ebola outbreaks in history and the first in West Africa. It is affecting 5 countries in West Africa. We have a respiratory illness that has already sickened more than 1,000 children in 10 states that is likely to become a nationwide problem, doctors say. Terror attacks in Jerusalem have grown exponentially over the past few months. Take a look at all the worldwide conflicts since this last April. Notice all the earthquakes occurring, tracked by the USGS. Here is an old chart, only going up to 2008, showing the increase in earthquakes higher than 6.0, and you can see it right here on your screen. When you look at the chart, you see at the highest point there were around 36 earthquakes that year over 6.0. That is nothing compared to this year. In 2014 so far, and the year is not even close to being over, we have already had 116 earthquakes, 6.0 and above, with 70 of them since the first blood moon. This year will more than quadruple the number of large earthquakes from the highest year of the last decade. We hear of major droughts, as in California. All of this to say that we are living during the birth pains of the coming of the Messiah. Now, I would like to deliver a bombshell of biblical proportions. Everyone needs to understand the prophetic time clock and prophetic calendar of the days we are living in, which is why I wrote the book Blood Moons, which is the book I mentioned just a few moments ago, and produced the Shemitah calendar for the coming year starting in a few weeks on Rosh Hashanah. The Shemitah year is the 7th year of the 7-year cycle when the land of Israel had to rest, and it was an economic reset year for the financial system. In Genesis, God started the 7-day cycle. We have a 7-day week. Then there is a 7-week cycle of 49 days in the Bible from first fruits to Shavuot, or Pentecost. We have the 7-year cycle known as the Shemitah cycle. There is the 7 Shemitah cycle of 49 years brings us to the 7-year of Jubilee. We know from the Bible that a day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and it has been 6,000 years since the creation of Adam. We are about to enter the 7th millennium, known as the Day of Rest. For the most part, theologians agree that the tribulation is 7 years long. What I am proposing is that it is simply a continuation of the Shemitah cycle that has been ticking along for ages. The tribulation will not be any random sequence of 7 years, but the first year of the tribulation will begin with the first year of the 7-year cycle. This has huge prophetic implications when we realize this Rosh Hashanah is the 7th year of the 7-year cycle, and the fall of 2015 begins a new 7-year cycle. In plain English, the 7-year tribulation could begin next fall. So that's what he's saying here. He just says it point blank. In plain English, he says, the 7-year tribulation, as we all know about, could begin next fall in 2015. He continues, If it does not, then that means it will not start for another 7 years, since it is just a continuation of God's orderly time clock. I am not saying the Lord will return next fall. I am not saying the rapture will take place next fall. I am just saying, regardless of where you want to put us on God's timeline, the 7 year tribulation is part of that timeline and will happen as part of the Shemitah cycle. We will know more definitely next year when we have the super blood moon for the first time in all of history that appears in Jerusalem in the 7th month of the biblical calendar at the end of the 7th year, kicking off the first year of the new 7 year cycle. We have 1 year to prepare. This is not a Y2K theory based on the solar pagan calendar or the Mayan calendar, but one based on the calendar the Creator gave us to give us warnings of things to come, just as I presented in the book Blood Moons. So that's the article, the complete article by Pastor Mark Biltz. So let's take a look at what he's saying here. So he just point blank said the tribulation, the 7 year tribulation that is, could start in 2015. Or he's actually giving some very good reasons here as to why the tribulation could start in the year 2015. But two things I want to point out is he is correct in this article at the very beginning of what I read to you. For example, when you look at he says here, when you look at the chart, you see at the highest point, there were around 36 earthquakes that year over 6.0. That is nothing compared to this year in 2014 so far. And the year is not even close to being over. We have already had 116 earthquakes, 6.0 and above. Okay, he's correct. Earthquakes are increasing. All of these things are increasing. Very clearly, we have some troublesome times hitting the world. And at a accelerated rate the last few years, you might even think we're in somewhat of a tribulation now. At least that's the way it looks to me. Christians are being killed for their faith. Hundreds are being killed for their faith. There's an idea that if you're a Christian, you'll get raptured out of here before you have to get killed for your faith or something like that. Would defeat the entire purpose of getting killed for your faith as a Christian, because all the Christians will be gone in the rapture. So that would leave those who are left behind. Now, why would they profess their faith? I would say there would be some Christians left behind after the rapture that would profess their faith because they realize they just got left behind. So they're only left with the option of getting slaughtered for their faith or just saying they don't believe and their lives being saved. But the only point that I'm making there is no Christian thus far before the rapture that has escaped the fate of them having to confess their faith in Jesus Christ or get killed. That could happen before the rapture. And I'm fairly confident that after the rapture that could happen as well. But I believe, and you tell me as well what you think, but I believe the 7 year tribulation is the tribulation that you see most described in the book of Revelation, where I'm talking it gets so chaotic as the entire world will be undone. As the scriptures say, every mountain will be leveled with earthquakes just hitting the entire world. Major events in the heavens happening, such as asteroids or meteors hitting our planet that will potentially leave humanity on the edge of extinction. That's the type of tribulation that I foresee in the 7 year tribulation. That's my interpretation of it. But for the most part, what I've seen in this article from Pastor Mark Biltz seems like it could be fairly accurate. He mentions something here in his article. He says here, I am not saying the Lord will return next fall. I am not saying the rapture will take place next fall. I am just saying, regardless of where you want to put us on God's timeline, the 7 year tribulation is part of that timeline and will happen as part of the Shemitah cycle. So I'm not sure if he's pointing out that he's not saying that the rapture will take place next fall, but potentially the 7 year tribulation could happen. My understanding is that the tribulation will happen after the rapture. So if he's not saying that the rapture will take place next fall, but possibly the 7 year tribulation, then the rapture will take place next fall because the rapture takes place before the 7 year tribulation. And that is my interpretation of the scriptures. But that might not be what he's saying here. It does kind of give the impression that what he's being open to the possibility that the 7 year tribulation could take place and then the rapture could take place anytime. And it could very well be that way. But just like I said, my own interpretation, and I would like to hear from you on this, but my own interpretation is that the rapture will happen and then we'll begin the 7-year tribulation. I'm not talking about the tribulation that we are currently in. Clearly, we are in a tribulation like never before in history. Clearly, the signs in the scripture pointed out in Matthew chapter 24 are happening as I'm speaking right now. There is an acceleration in earthquakes. There is an acceleration in diseases. Technology has increased. If you compare from the beginning of the creation of the world until today, there is no comparison between 150 years ago, 120 or even 100 years ago, before electricity, before automotives, before you are seeing jet planes in the sky. You can get from one place to another in a matter of hours all over the world. The internet, everything. There is no comparison in technology between, let me say, the past 100, 120 or so years and the beginning of creation. It's pretty much been just about the same from the beginning of creation until about 120 or so years ago. I'm not sure of those numbers, but you get the point. So clearly we are in a generation that is like no other. Clearly we are in a generation that is set aside from all the generations ever in history, with technology, with medicine, just everywhere you look, we have nuclear power that could blow the entire world up many times over. If you deny that, then you're denying the very reality of where we are in history. So, but I'm talking about a specific 7-year tribulation as talked about in the scriptures, where we're going to see some major celestial events. We're going to see events happen on our planet of unthinkable proportions. So anyways, there you have what Mark Biltz has said, and it seems to be pretty accurate to me. I wanted to bring it to you to see what you think. Let me hear your opinions. This is Wesley Ferris signing out.